What we've seen here in Delacroix is we've had a late developing spring. Finally, the water temperature when we fished on Tuesday was about 71 degrees. So what normally happens in the early part of March is happening in the later part of March. April is going to be a lot better than March. The fish are starting to move into really a more consistent spring pattern. They've been stacked up in places that we don't see very often, like the edge of Alligator Pass in the lake, Little Lake. Normally, they're there for a little bit, they don't stay as long. The fish are starting to move into the area of the spring pattern, and along the edge of Oak River, North Side, Skippy Bay, Point Fiend, all of those areas are beginning to develop. In addition to that, the redfish are starting to get in their normal places now. We just think we're about 30 days behind what would be the normal spring pattern. There's some bait in the water, but it's not real prevalent, and so therefore the plastics are producing pretty well because the fish are limited in what they can get. I think the May shrimp movement will start showing up a little bit later in May than it does at this time, so you'll be able to still fish well with plastics and do very well with it, you know. And what we do mostly is we tell our customers that we're going to use mostly paddle tail baits or voodoos. You know, the Deadly Dudleys and Matrix, they all produce very well, and the voodoo shrimp. And that's the same thing that most people do. We fish darks on dark days, lights on light days. For the most part, the fish are on the shallow water now. You get some drop-offs from that 4 or 5 feet to go into a little bit shallow water, but they're not in the deep water for the most part. So far, the water's pretty good, except for when we had a prevailing northwest wind last week. That sort of muddied up the water, but the spillway's not open very much, so by and large, the water's very clean. Our normal pattern is that we start going out in mid-May. This year, it might be a little bit later, but we hope to start moving out in that direction in mid-May. Certainly by then we're out by Bay Lafourche and all of those outer bays, you know. Because of that northwest wind on Tuesday, we moved probably more than I've ever moved on the inside. I burned probably 16 gallons of gas. We have to move a lot this time of year, unless you get to a situation where at Alligator Pass and Little Lake, they just were there for a while, so you could pretty well park your boat and catch them. But what happens is they get so many fishermen concentrated in an area that it starts scaring the fish. So generally our plan is, if you hadn't caught them in 10 or 15 minutes, you go to somewhere else.